Megan Torres wiped down the counter for the third time. That hour the Starlight Diner was quiet tonight, with only a few travelers scattered across the worn booths. She had been working the night shift for 2 years now, ever since she left the military. Her left ear still rang sometimes from the explosion that had changed everything. Hearing loss had ended her career as a military linguist, but it had also taught her something valuable during her recovery. She learned sign language to communicate with her kitchen manager, who was born deaf now. She could speak with her hands as fluently as with her voice. The door chimed, and Megan looked up, her breath caught in her throat. 3 massive figures entered the diner, and they were unlike anything she had seen outside of news broadcasts. Dragons, not the earth lizards of ancient myths, but the crystalline-scaled beings who ruled entire star systems. Their scales shimmered with inner light, and their presence filled the small diner with an almost electric energy. The lead dragon was silver and gold, with eyes like molten amber behind him walked to others, and between them was a younger dragon who seemed somehow different. His scales were deep blue, shot through with white like stars in a night sky. He moved carefully, as if trying not to take up too much space. Megan grabbed menus and approached the table they chose. The silver dragon spoke in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. He introduced himself as Commander Zethris of the Dragon Sovereign Delegation. They were on Haven's Rest for trade negotiations and required sustenance. Megan took their orders. Efficiently, she noticed that the young blue dragon did not speak. Instead, he gestured to a small device on his wrist, which projected holographic words. The other dragons barely glanced at him when his translation device displayed his order. The silver dragon waved it away and ordered something different for him. The young dragon's shoulders slumped, but he said nothing. Could say nothing. Megan realized over the next hour, she watched the dynamics at the table. The 2 older dragons discussed politics and trade routes. The young one tried several times to contribute through his device. Each time they talked over him or ignored the projected words entirely. Once the silver dragon actually reached over and turned off the device. Mid-sentence, Megan felt anger rise in her chest. She knew what it felt like to be dismissed because of how you communicated when she brought their meals. The young dragon's device malfunctioned. The hologram flickered and died. He tapped it frantically, but nothing happened. Silver Dragon sighed with obvious frustration and told Megan they would order for him, but Megan had noticed something while the device failed. The young dragon's hands had moved. It was subtle and quick, but she recognized the patterns he was signing. Her heart raced as she made a decision. Set down the plates and then signed a simple greeting. "Hello, my name is Megan." The effect was immediate. The young dragon's head snapped up, and his eyes went wide with shock. His hands moved quickly in response. "My name is Keltharth." Other dragons stared in confusion. They had no idea what was happening. Megan pulled out her order pad and signed, again asking if he needed help with anything. Kelthar's hands trembled as he signed back, this time with more confidence. "No one has seen me in 20 years, no one has tried to speak with me in my language. You are the first," the silver dragon demanded. To know what was happening, Megan explained calmly that she knew sign language and that Kelthar had been trying to communicate. Dragon looked embarrassed and angry at the same time. He stated that Kelthar was mute and had been since childhood, a defect in the bloodline that brought shame to their house. Megan felt her temper flare but kept her voice professional. She said that being mute was not a defect and that sign language was a complete and valid form of communication. The silver dragon dismissed her and told her to bring the check, but Kelthar signed quickly to Megan, "Please come back when they leave. I must speak with you." It is urgent. Megan nodded slightly and went to process their payment. An hour later, the delegation left. Remained, he had told the others he would wait for transport, and they had departed without argument. Clearly happy to be rid of him, Megan sat across from him in the booth, and they began to sign. Kelthar explained his story. He was the youngest son of King Verithax, ruler of the Dragon Sovereign. When he was just a child, his father broke a treaty with an elf sorceress named Lirelay. Shadowthorn, as payment for the broken oath she cursed, Keltharsh took his voice completely, not just his ability to make sound, but his vocal cords themselves ceased to exist. He could not speak or hum or even scream. For 20 years he had lived in silence. He said people saw him as broken and useless. They gave him a translator device, but never bothered to learn. How to truly communicate with him, he had taught himself various forms of sign language by studying human databases, hoping that one day he might find someone who could see him. Megan signed back asking why he wanted to talk with her specificators. Expression grew gravy, signed slowly making sure she understood every word. War is coming something. Ancient and terrible, the Void Collective, they are beings from the space between stars, civilizations that died long ago, but have been brought back. By dark technology, they consume everything. Light, matter, energy, life itself. His hands moved faster now with urgency, the dragon. Sovereign knows about them, but they argue and delay. They do not believe the threat is really have studied the patterns for years. I know where they will strike first. Humanity, you are young in the galaxy, and your worlds are not well defended. The Void Collective always attacks the weakest first, to build strength, but humanity has something they fear. Megan signed asking what. That could be humans or unpredictable. Every other species in the galaxy follows patterns and protocols. But humans adapt and change and create new solutions constantly. This chaos is your strength. The Void Collective cannot easily predict you, that is why they want to eliminate you before you become dangerous to them. Kelthor reached across the table and his clawed hand gently touched hers. I need your help. I have strategies and plans that could save billions of lives, but no one will listen to me. They see a mute dragon and assume I have nothing valuable to say. You understand what it means to be overlooked, will you help me make them listen? Megan looked into his eyes and saw desperate hope there. She thought about her own years of being dismissed. After her injury, she thought about all the brilliant ideas that had died unheard because someone could not communicate in the expected way. She signed her answer. I will help you. Kelthor's relief was visible. He signed rapidly, explaining that he would send her encrypted messages with more information. She would need to be careful. There were those even among the dragons who did not want the truth to come out. Some had made deals with dark powers. Some simply preferred ignorance to the hard work of preparation. Before he left, Kelthor signed one more thing. Thank you, Megan. Terezi have given me something. I thought I had lost forever hope. After he departed, Megan stood alone in the empty diner outside the viewport. She could see the stars somewhere. Out there in the darkness, something was coming, and somehow she had just become part of the only plan to stop it. She looked down at her hands. These hands that had learned to speak in new ways after lost, these hands that had bridged a gap no one else had thought to cross. She had a feeling they were about to change the course of history. The night shift had just become much more interesting. 3 months passed since Megan first met Kelthrin. That time her quiet life had transformed completely. Every few days encrypted messages arrived on her personal datapad, star maps with strange markings, reports about energy signatures and deep space warnings about ship movements near the outer Kalana. Kelthor was feeding her intelligence that no one else seemed to have. Naughty did not know how he gathered it all, but the information was detailed and terrifying. The Void Collective was real, and they were getting closer. Megan had tried to report the warnings to station security. They laughed at Hera. Waitress claiming to have insider information about an intergalactic threat. They filed her report and forgot about it immediately. She tried contacting military channels using her old service credentials, most ignored. Her one officer told her to stop wasting their time with conspiracy theories. Frustration gnawed at Hersha, had critical information and no way to make anyone listen. Then, on a cold morning, when the station lights were still dimmed for night cycle, she arrived at the diner early. Someone was already there. A figure sat at the corner booth, bathed in shadows. Megan approached cautiously with her hand near the emergency come button on her belt. The figure looked up and Megan froze. It was a woman. No, not just a woman. An elf. Megan had seen elves before in broadcasts and documentaries, but seeing one in person was entirely different. She was tall and impossibly graceful, with silver hair that seemed to move on its own like liquid metal flowing down her shoulders. Her eyes were ancient. They held centuries of knowledge and power. Her skin had a faint luminescence, and she wore robes that shifted between deep purple and black like the void of space itself. Beside her booth curled a creature that made Megan's heart stop. A dragon, but not like Kelthar or the crystalline dragon she had met. This dragon was made of shadow and starlight. His Scales were deep black, but rippled with galaxy stars, seemed to shine from within his body, and where he moved the air itself darkened. His eyes were silver, and they watched. Megan with keen intelligence. The elf woman smiled, and it was not entirely comforting. She spoke, and her voice was like music played. On instruments that had not been invented yet, Megan Torazai have heard much about Upli Sitwi. Have important matters to discuss, Megan sat, because refusing seemed impossible. The elf introduced herself as Lirale Shadowthornth Dragon was named. Nethersong and he was her bonded companion they had traveled across 3 star systems to find. Megan Lirale explained that she knew about the conversations with Keltharsh, knew about the warnings and the intelligence he had been sharing. She knew, because she was the one who cursed him 20 years ago. Megan felt anger flash through her before she could speak. Lirale raised a hand. Listen before you judge. What I did was not cruelty, but protection. Kelthar's mother was not fully dragon. She was part celestially, being of pure cosmic energy. When Kelthar was born, he inherited a gift from her bloodline. His voice carries the song of creation. If he were to sing with his true voice, he could reshape reality itself. He could create or destroy on a scale that would terrify. Eularal's expression grew sad when he was 5 years old. Certain factions learned of his power. They attempted to kidnap him to use as a weapon. His father, King Verithax, came to me desperate. He begged me to hide Kelthar's power to make him seem weak and useless, so no one would try to take him. I agreed, but the price was high. Removed his voice completely, bound it with my own life forces. Long as I live, he cannot speak aloud. It was the only way to truly hide what he was. Megan absorbed this information slowly. She signed, asking why Lirale was telling her this now. Because the time for hiding is over. The Void Collective is coming, and they are worse than Kelthar's warnings, suggest they. Not just resurrected civilizations, they are civilizations that made a deal with entropy itself. They gave up their mortality to become eternal, but cost was that they must consume life energy to continue existing. They have already devoured 17 galaxies in other dimensions. Now they have found our Nethersong's voice entered Megan's mind directly. It was a sensation she had never experienced, like thoughts that were not her own, appearing fully formed in her consciousness. Human, you possess a rare gift. You can bridge divides between species. You saw Kelthor when others looked through him. This ability is what the coming war needs. Mostarile leaned forward. Galaxy is fractured. Dragons, elves, humans, the collective minds, the shapeshifter clans, all of these species distrust each other. We have fought wars for millennia over territory, resources, ideology. The Void Collective knows this. They are counting on our division. We will destroy ourselves through infighting before they even arrive. But Kelthar has a plan, a strategy that could unite the species. He needs someone to speak for him, someone. The different factions might actually listen to Megan. Signed, asking why they would listen to a human waitress. Because you are noble. Delirali's smile was genuine this time. If a dragon general proposed this plan, the elves would suspect manipulation. If I proposed it, the dragons would call it a trap. If the AI collectives suggested it, everyone would fear machine dominance. But you are a former soldier who learned sign language and became a waitress. You have no political power, no military rank, no corporate backing. You are simply someone who chose to see another person when everyone else was blind. That kind of authenticity cannot be faked. People will listen because you have nothing to gain from lying. Megan felt the weight of what they were asking. She signed slowly, asking what would happen if she refused. Lirale did not sugarcoat it. Billions will die, probably including everyone on this station. The Void Collective will sweep through human space first. Then they will move to the smaller species territories. By the time the major powers realize the threat is real, it will be too late. Can walk away, live your life until the darkness comes, or you can stand with us and fight for a chance. And a Thursong uncoiled from beside the booth. He was massive, even crouched low. His head was level with Megan's. Moved closer and pressed his great head against her hand. The touch sent warmth through her whole body. Dragons choose their companions careful. In Ithers has lived for 300 years. In all that time, he has only bonded with Lirale. He approaches you with trust that should tell you something about who you truly are. Megan looked at her hand resting on Nethersong's. Scales, they felt like warm glass with energy humming. Beneath, she thought about Kelther, isolated and ignored for 20 years. She thought about the billions of people across the galaxy who had no idea what was coming. She thought about the little, deaf girl who sometimes came to the diner with her parents, the child who lit up whenever Megan signed with her. What kind of future would that girl have if Megan walked away? Now she pulled her hand back and signed her decision. I will help, but I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more half-truths. If I am going to convince people to trust me, then I need the complete truth. Lorelei nodded with respect, and her ancient ice agreed. We leave for Parathion in 3 hours. It is the Dragon Sovereign. Homeworld Kelther is there gathering what allies he can. You will be the first human to ever walk in the crystal halls. Prepare yourself. What comes next will test everything you are. Megan stood on shaking legs. She looked around the diner that had been her world for 2 years, the worn boothsta scratched counter, the coffee maker that never worked quite right. Tit seemed so small now. She turned back to Lirelei and Nethersong. How do we travel to Parathion? It must be weeks away, even at faster than light speed. Lirelei smiled, and it was slightly wicked. Nethersong as a void dragon, he exists partially outside normal space when he flies. We do not travel through distance, we travel through the spaces between distances. Will take 3 hours, because that is how long I need to prepare the dimensional anchors. Hold on to something. When we depart, the transition can be disorienting for first-timers. Megan nodded. May Miche had 3 hours to quit her job, pack her few belongings, and somehow prepare to leave. Everything she knew behind 3 hours, until her life changed forever. She looked at Nethersong, and the dragon's silver eyes seemed to hold understanding. He knew what it cost to leave safety behind. Lirelei and Nethersong departed to prepare their ship. Megan sat back down in the booth. Her hands were shaking, not from fear exactly, but from the enormity of what she had just agreed to. Somewhere in the dark between stars, an ancient evil was moving, and somehow she had just become part of the only plan to stop Ida. Waitress, a former soldier with a damaged ear and knowledge of sign language, against the Void Collective. It seemed absurd, but then again she had learned that the most important connections often seemed impossible at first. She had 3 hours time to get ready. The journey through dimensional space was everything, they really warned it would be. Megan spent the first hour trying not to vomit as reality twisted around. Nethersong's flight colors that had no name sounds that bypassed her ears and resonated directly in her bones, the sensation of moving in directions that should not exist. When they finally emerged into normal space, Megan was never so happy to see regular star Sparathion hung before them like a jewel. The planet itself seemed impossible. Mountains floated in the sky, held aloft by some invisible force. Crystal spires rose from the surface, catching sunlight and splitting it into rainbow. Cascade cities carved from single massive gemstones dotted the landscape. Dragons flew between the floating peaks in graceful arcs. Their scales glittered, and Megan could see hundreds of them, maybe thousands. This was the heart of dragon civilization, the oldest culture in the known galaxy, and she was about to walk into their hall. Song descended toward the largest floating mountain, a palace of crystalline towers and bridges that seemed grown rather than built. As they landed, guards approached, massive red and gold dragons with armor that gleamed. They spoke in their rumbling language to Lirelei. Caught enough to understand, they were surprised a human had never been granted access to this place. Lirelei responded with authority, invoked ancient guest rights, and mentioned Kelther's name. The guards exchanged glances but allowed them passage inside the palace. Megan tried not to stare at everything. The floors were transparent, crystal showing the clouds far below. The walls held murals made of colored light. Music seemed to come from the very airy symphony of tones that resonated with the crystal structure. They were led through vast halls where dragons moved with purpose. Some were in their natural form, others had shifted to smaller humanoid shapes. All of them stopped to stare at Megan. A human in the crystal halls. It was unheard of. Finally, they reached a chamber guarded by 2 dragons. Lirelei spoke briefly with them, and the doors opened. Inside, Kelther waited. He was not alone. 3 other dragons were with him, too, in humanoid form, and one in natural dragon shape. They looked up as Megan entered, and she saw relief wash over Kelther's face. He moved forward quickly and signed a greeting. His hands moved with obvious happiness. Yukaima was afraid you would decide it was too dangerous. Megan signed Bakai, made a promise, Sai. Keep my promise as one of. The other dragon stepped forward. She was in humanoid form with bronze skin and copper-colored hair. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She spoke in accented but clear English. So this is the human who can understand our silent prince. I am Commander Kira of the Western Fleet. We are the few who believe Kelther's warnings. The others introduced themselves. Lieutenant Vex, a tactical specialist stand. An elder dragon named Sora, who had fought in wars thousands of years ago. They gathered around a table, where holographic displays showed star maps. Kelthor began signing, and Megan translated his words aloud. Void Collective will arrive in 40 days. They will emerge from dark space at 3 points. Simultaneously, here near the human frontier colonies here. At the edge of elf territory on here, where the shapeshifter trade routes converge, this is their standard pattern strike. At 3 separated points to divide defensive forces, each species will focus on protecting their own space. None will send aid to the others. By the time anyone realizes they need to work together, it will be too late. Commander Kira studied the maps. What you propose is that we preemptively unite our forces, but the king will never agree to that. He barely acknowledges the void collective exists. Kelthar's hands moved sharply. Then we must make him acknowledge it tomorrow. There is a war council. Representatives from all the major houses will attend. Need Megan to speak for me there too. Translate my strategy so they cannot ignore. It's Sora, the elder dragon spoke. Her voice was like wind through Canyon Zhang. Prince, even with a translator, they have ignored you for years. Why would they listen now? Kelther signed, and Megan translated. Because I have proof. Have been monitoring the dark space boundaries for 5 years. I have energy signatures, gravitational anomalies, patterns that match historical records of void collective movements. I have data they cannot dismiss, but they need to hear it from a voice they will listen to. All eyes turned to Megan. She felt the weight of their expectations. Lieutenant Vex spoke up. No offense, human, but you are an outsider. Would the noble houses listen to you over their own kind? Megan thought carefully before responding. They will not listen. Because of who I am, they will listen because of what I represent. Eskelthar has been dismissed as broken because he cannot speak their way. But I can show them that communication is not about how you speak. It is about whether anyone bothers to listen. A human can understand what a dragon prince is saying when his own people cannot. That says more about them than it does about him. Sora made a sound that might have been dragon laughter. She has spiritai like her. Very well, tomorrow we present Kelther's strategy to the council, but be warned, young human, the court is full of vipers. Some dragons have grown comfortable with the status quo, will not welcome change. The others have made secret pacts with dark forces. They will actively oppose Yuliral, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. There is another complication. I have been sensing something since we arrived. There are void collective agents already here. They have infiltrated the court. Kelther's hands moved urgently. How many unknown, but I felt their touch on the dimensional barriers when we entered. Someone has been using dark magic here. Someone close to the throne. Commander Kira cursed in the dragon language. If there are traitors in the court, then presenting Kelther's plan could be dangerous. They might move against us. Against Himmleral nodded. They might, which is why Nethersong and I will be on guard, but we cannot let fear stop us. Every day we delay is a day closer to invasion. Megan looked at Kelther's expression was determined, but she could see the worry in his eyes. He had lived his whole life being overlooked and dismissed. Tomorrow he would stand before the most powerful dragons in the galaxy, and she would be his voice. She signed to him, I will make them hear. Why promise? He signed Bakai. No, you will. That is why I asked for your help. The meeting continued for hours. They reviewed strategy and arguments, planned for objections and hostile questions, prepared evidence and supporting data. By the time they finished, the planet's twin suns were setting their light, painted the crystal palace in shades of amber and rose. Commander Kira showed in two guest quarters, a room carved from a single piece of blue crystal shed. Left Megan alone to rest, but sleep did not come as Megan stood at the window, looking out over the floating mountains. Dragons glided through the evening sky there. Forms silhouetted against the sunset, this world was beautiful, ancient, and majestic. And tomorrow she would stand before its rulers, a human waitress speaking. For a prince they had spent 20 years ignoring, she thought about the little deaf girl from the diner, about all the people across the galaxy who had no idea what was coming. She thought about Kelthur, alone and silent for so many years. This was bigger than her fears. Tomorrow would test everything she was, but she had made a promise, and Megan Torres kept her promises. She finally slept as the stars came out above Paratheon, dreaming of battles yet to come. The War Council chamber was the most intimidating space Megan had ever entered. It was a vast circular room with walls of clear crystal. Through them she could see the sky and mountains, creating the sensation of floating in open air. Dragon nobles filled the tiered seating, dozens of them in various forms. Their collective presence was overwhelming. At the center, on the highest seat, was King Verithax himself. He was massive, even for a dragon, gold and crimson scales that seemed to burn with inner fire. His eyes were like molten metal. Ancient and merciless. Megan stood on the speaking floor with Kelthur beside her. Laral and Nethersong waited in the observers section. Commander Kira, Lieutenant Vex, and Elder Sora sat with the military contingent. King's voice boomed through the chamber. We are gathered to discuss the alleged threat from beyond our borders. My IA son Kelthur has requested this assembly. Have granted it, though I confess skepticism. He gestured toward Kelthur with what might have been discussed. Speak, then show us this great danger you claim. Approach us. Kolthar began signing. His movements were precise and controlled. Megan took a breath and started translating aloud. Her voice carried through the chamber. Thank you, Father, for granting this council. I come before you with information gathered over 5 years of careful study. The Void Collective is not a myth or a distant threat. They are real, and they are approaching our galaxy. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dragons. Several looked skeptical. One noble in golden armor stood. This is foolishness. Void Collective is a story to frighten children. There is no evidence they exist. Kolthar signed rapidly, and Megan translated. Die have evidence. Synergy signatures detected at 17 different dark space boundary points. Gravitational distortions that match historical records from the last Void incursion 3,000 years ago, and communication intercepts from beyond our sensor. Ranjakelthur gestured, and holographic displays appeared. They showed complex data streams, energy patterns, mathematical models. The evidence was comprehensive, but another noble stood. Evan, if these readings are genuine, how do we know they indicate this? Void Collective, they could be natural phenomena, or perhaps another species we have not encountered. Megan translated Kelthur's response. The patterns are too regular to be natural, and the energy signatures match those recorded by the ancients, the beings who built this very palace. They left warnings about the Void Collective and the foundational crystals, warnings we have ignored for millennia. King Verithax leaned forward. You speak of ancient warnings, yet you have been silent for 20 years. Why should we trust your interpretation now? Kelthur's hands moved with visible emotion. Megan translated carefully. I have not been silent by choice, Father. Have tried to communicate for years, but my words were ignored because of how I speak them. The fact that you ask why you should trust me proves the point. You have never bothered to listen. The chamber fell silence. Several dragons shifted uncomfortably. Commander Kira stood from her section. Ab reviewed Prince Kelthur's data personally. It is sound. The threat is real. We should be preparing defenses. Not debating whether to listen, but then something changed. Daydragon in the back section stood. He was sleek and dark-scaled, with eyes that seemed too bright. When he spoke, his voice carried an odd resonance. This is all very dramatic, but I move that we table this discussion. We should send scouts to verify these claims before committing resources. Several other nobles voiced agreement. Megan felt unease creep up her spine. Something was wrong. Glirale must have felt it too. She stood suddenly, and her voice cut through the chamber. That dragon is compromised. He carries the taint of void energy. Everyone turned to stare. The ACCUSED dragon laughed. Tit was a cold sound compromised. What a quaint accusation. Eelfey. And merely being practical leerily, hands began to glow with silver light. Nethersong rose beside her, his shadow form expanding. She spoke with absolute certainty. You are an agent of the void. Collective, you have been feeding them information about our defenses. How many others here serve the darkness? Chamber erupted into chaos. Guards moved forward. The accused dragon shed his disguise in a ripple of wrongness. His true form was revealed, scales like cracked glass eyes that held only emptiness void. Corruption had taken him completely. He attacked, but Nethersong was faster. The shadow dragon intercepted with jaws that seemed to tear reality. Other corrupted dragons revealed themselves. 3 more scattered through the chamber. They had been hiding among the nobles waiting. The war council dissolved into battle. Crystal walls shattered. Dragons shifted to combat forms. Magic and claw and fire filled the air. Kelther grabbed Megan and pulled her behind a stone pillar. His eyes were wide with Fernet for himself. For her, she was fragile compared to dragons. One stray blast could kill her, but she refused to cower. She pulled out her data pedif. The council would not listen to reason. Maybe they would listen to survival. She accessed the evidence files Kelther had prepared, connected to the chamber's holographic system, and broadcast everything at maximum volume. Images filled the air above the fighting the void. Collective fleet, massive ships of twisted metal and dark energy, recordings of destroyed civilizations, planets reduced to lifeless husks, mathematical projections showing their approach. Vector estimated time of arrival 40 days. Slowly the fighting stopped. Dragons froze as they saw the images. Scale of what was coming. King Verithox stood amid the wreckage. His voice was quieter now. Is this real? Kelther signed, and Megan translated from behind her pillar. Yes, father. This is what I have been trying to tell you. This is why I needed you to listen. The corrupted dragons were subdued, bound with magic and physical chains. Slirale approached them. Her expression was grim. They are too far. Gonthavoid has consumed their essence. They are puppets now. Nothing more. She looked at the king. This is what awaits us all. If we do nothing, Commander Kira stepped forward. Your Majesty, we need to mobilize immediately. We must contact the other species form. An alliance. King Verathax looked old. Suddenly, the weight of centuries showing in his eyes. He looked at Keltherili, looked at him perhaps for the first time in 20 years. Mysonia failed. Why dismissed you as broken when you were trying to save us? Kelther signed slowly. Megan translated. There is time still to make things right, but we must act now. King nodded. He raised his voice to address the chamber. The war council is ended. The defense council begins. Commander Kira, you will coordinate with our fleet. Selder Sora, gather the military advisors, and my sonny paused, his voice softening. Keldauteri will lead the strategic plan. In your human voice, he looked at Megan. Will ensure everyone hears your wisdom. Over the next hours, the palace transformed. What had been a court of politics became a center of war preparation. Megan found herself at the center of it, all translating Kelther's strategies, coordinating between dragon commanders who were slowly learning to respect the Silent Prince, but there was still so much to do. The dragons were mobilizing, but they were only one. Speciously early approached as Megan took a brief rest. We must go to the human worlds next year. People need to be warned. They need to join the alliance. Megan nodded. She knew what that meant. She would have to convince Earth's government, the same government that had ignored her warnings months ago, but now she had proof. Now she had the backing of the dragon. Severine Kelther joined them. He signed. Will you speak for me against your people? Megan signed back without hesitation. Always, I will always be your voice, until you were ready to use your own. Kelther's expression showed confusantly. Early explained gently. The curse can be broken, but the cost is my life. My essence is bound to his silence. If I die, his voice returned. Kelther's hands moved frantically. No, I will not ask that of you. You saved Melaral. Smiled sadly, and now I may need to save everyone, but the decision is for another day. First, we must unite the galaxy. Megan looked between the mat, the elf who had sacrificed so much, at the dragon prince who had endured decades of silence, Nethersong, whose ancient eyes held sorrow. This was bigger than any of them, but together maybe they had a chance. Outside the Crystal Palace, the twin suns set again, painting the sky in shades of fire, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Void Collective drew closer. The journey to Earth took 2 days even through Nethersong's dimensional shortcuts. Megan spent the time preparing her arguments, gathering evidence, and trying not to think about how unlikely it all was. A Waitress convincing the United Colonial Assembly to join an alien alliance. It seemed impossible, but then so did everything else she had done recently. Earth's orbital defense platforms locked onto them immediately. Nethersong's arrival triggered every alarm in the system communications. Channels erupted with demands for identification. Lirelay calmly transmitted diplomatic codes. Within hours, they were granted permission to land at the assembly complex in Geneva. The meeting was scheduled for the following day. Megan barely slept. When she finally stood before the assembly chamber, she felt tiny representatives from every human colony world filled the seats. Military generals, corporate leaders, political officials, all of them skeptical, all of them looking at her like she was insane. Admiral Kate Morrison of the Frontier Fleet was there. She was one of the few who had taken Megan's earlier warnings seriously. She nodded encouragement from her seat. The assembly president called the session to order. Her name was Linda Chen, and her expression was professionally neutral. Former Corporal Torres, you have requested this emergency session. You claim an existential threat approaches. You have brought alien representatives to support this claim. The floor is yours. Megan stepped forward. Beside her, Kelther stood in his humanoid form. Lirelay and Nethersong waited at the edge of the chamber. She began speaking, translating Kelther's signs as he laid out everything: the Void Collective's history, their approach vectors, the timeline. The evidence holographic displays showed the data ships emerging from dark space. Energy signatures destroyed civilizations. Some assembly members leaned forward with interest. Others looked doubtful. One corporate representative stood. This could all be fabricated. How do we know this is not some elaborate scheme to gain access to human resources? Before Megan could respond, Kelther did something unexpected. He stepped forward and began to sign directly to the assembly not to. Megan, his hands moved with passionate intensity. Megan translated, but she let the emotion show in her voice. I am Kelther, son of the Dragon Sovereign. For 20 years I have lived in silence, cursed and dismissed by my own people. I learned your human sign languages. I studied your cultures because I knew that one day humanity would be important, not because of your weapons, it's not because of your resources, but because of what you represent. The assembly was silent now, fully focused. Kelther continued signing. Every other species in this galaxy is ancient. We have patterns worn deep by millennia. We think we know everything, but humans are different. You adapt. You create new solutions. You do not accept that things must be one way simply because they have always been that way. The Void Collective fears this. They consume based on predictability. On ancient patterns, they can exploit humanity's chaos as poison to them. That is why you are their first target. That is why we need you. Not as subjects or resources, but as equals, as the unpredictable element that makes our alliance strong. Megan finished translating, and the chamber remained quiet. Then Admiral Morrison stood. I have reviewed the evidence. I believe the threat is real. We should mobilize. But the president raised a hand. This is not a decision to be made lightly. Joining an alien military alliance, committing our forces to a war, we need time to deliberate. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed through the chamber. A military aide rushed to Admiral Morrison. She listened to his urgent whisper. Her face went pale. She looked up at the assembly. Long-range sensors have detected anomalies at the edge of the solar system. Multiple gravitic distortions. Energy signatures match the profiles provided by Prince Kelther. The timeline was wrong. They are here now. Panic erupted. Representatives shouted over each other. The president called for order, but no one listened. Kelther signed frantically. This is their tactic. They accelerate when they detect preparations. They know we were forming an alliance, so they struck early to prevent it. Megan's voice cut through the chaos. We have minutes, maybe hours, before they reach the inner system. We can either spend that time arguing, or we can fight. Admiral Morrison was already moving. She barked orders into her fleet mobilization. All defensive platforms online, civilian evacuation protocols. The president looked at Megan. What do you need from us? Megan felt the weight of the moment. Everything, every ship, every weapon, and trust. Trust that we know how to fight them. The president nodded sharply. You have it, Admiral Morrison? You have full authorization. Coordinate with our alien allies, the chamber? Emptied rapidly, everyone rushing to their stations, Megan ran with Kelthor and Lirelei. They raced to the orbital command center. The view screen showed the approaching threat ships emerging from impossible angles, vessels of dark metal and twisted. Geometry they defied. Physics moved through space like wounds in reality. The human fleet was launching hundreds of ships, but the Void Collective numbered in the thousands. Kelthor signed rapidly. Implement Chaos Protocol 7 random attack patterns. No formation discipline, make them unable to predict your movements. Admiral Morrison relayed the orders. Human pilots who had trained their entire lives in precise formations, now told to fly like madmen. It went against every instinct, but they did. If the fleets met in the space between Earth and Mars, the battle was unlike anything in human military history. Human ships dove and weaved with no pattern. They attacked from impossible angles. Broke off engagements randomly, used tactics that made no strategic sense, and it worked. The Void ships faltered their weapons. Tracking systems could not lock onto targets that moved with pure chaos. Their tactical computers crashed trying to predict the unpredictable, but there were too many for every. Void ship destroyed, 2 more emerged. The human fleet was taking devastating losses. Kelthor's hands moved desperately. We need the Dragon fleet. Where are they? Lirelei closed her eyes. Her consciousness reaching across dimensions. They are coming. King Varathex leads them personally, but they need time to arrive. Megan watched the battle, watched human ships dying. There has to be something more we can do. Lirelei looked at her, then at Kelthor. There is, but it requires the ultimate sacrifice. She explained quickly, if she broke the curse, if she gave Kelthor back his voice. He could sing the song of creation. It would destroy the Void ships, but it would also kill her. Her life force was bound to the curse. Kelthor signed with shaking hands. No, I will not allow it. There must be another way. Nethersong's voice entered all their minds. There is no other way. I have known this day would come. Lirelei has known it too. The Shadow Dragon pressed his great head against his bonded companion. We have had 300 years together. It is enough. Lirelei's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. Kelthor, you were born with a gift, a voice that carries the power of creation itself. I silenced it to protect you, but now it is time. To let it be heard, she began the ritual, her hands glowing with silver fire. The light spread wrapped around Kelthor. He tried to pull away, but Nethersong held him gently. As the ritual completed, Lirelei grew weaker, her form becoming translucent. Kelthor felt something change in his throat, a sensation he had not felt in 20 years. He opened his mouth and sound emerged, not words yet. It's just a breath, but it was his Lirelei. Smiled, sing for us, sing for everyone. Then she faded, her essence dissipating into light. Nethersong roared, a sound of such grief that it shook the station. The dragon's form began to fade as well. Without Lirelei, he could not remain. Before he vanished, he looked at Megan, his silver eyes holding one final message. Protect them. She nodded through tears. I will. Kelthor stood trembling, tears streaming down his face. Around them, the battle raged. Ships dying, people dying. He had his voice back, but the cost. Megan took his hand. She signed, even though he could hear. Now they gave you this gift. Use it. Save everyone. Make their sacrifice mean something. Kelthor took a shaking breath. Then another. He began to sing. It started quiet. Just a single note, but it was pure, perfect, a sound that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequency of reality itself. The note grew, expanded. Other harmonics joined. His voice became a symphony, the song of creation. On the view screens, the Void ships began to react, their hulls vibrating, cracking. Megan realized what was needed. The song was powerful, but it needed harmony. She grabbed the communication controls, opened channels to every ship in the human fleet. She explained quickly, broadcast any sound, music, voices, mathematical sequences, anything with rhythm or tone. Add to a song. Admiral Morrison did not hesitate. She gave the order suddenly. The void of space filled with sound, transmitted across all frequencies. Human music, old songs from Earth, new compositions from the colony's pilots, singing crews chanting, ship computers broadcasting mathematical sequences. It all wove together with Kelthor's song, creating a symphony of life, of chaos, and creativity.
Oh,
Of unpredictable human beauty, the void ships could not withstand it. They were beings of entropy, of silence, and ending this celebration of existence was antithetical to their nature. They dissolved, unraveled, pulled apart by the harmonic resonance. And then the dragon fleet arrived. Thousands of crystal ships, they added their own voices to the end. Symphony War chants, millennia-old harmonic drones from their engines. King Varathax himself roared. A sound that carried across the battlefield. Other species joined.